Deployment of some of their sons and daughters to some far-off place in the world.
What more can be done to save those girls from these terrorists? We'll ask former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown in Nigeria's capital today about what can be done to protect girls whose only crime is wanting an education from these horrific attacks. And it's prime time. Let the midterm election season begin with the first round of primary results forecast for November, with control of the Senate hanging in the balance.
It's not the end of the primary. It's really the beginning of our primary mission, which has been the mission all along. And that is to beat Kay Hagan and to make Harry Reid irrelevant in American.
And good day, I'm Andrea Mitchell in Washington. There are reports of more girls that have been kidnapped in Nigeria as the U.S., France, and Great Britain are beginning to mobilize an international rescue effort. Congress paused Tuesday for a moment of silence in honor of Nigeria's stolen girls.
In the end, this is an act of barbarity, and this is a test of our world and a test of our country. And we stand today in solidarity to find these girls.
And Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar now joins me from Capitol Hill. Senator, it has taken a long time to get the U.S. to respond. The explanation seems to be that Nigeria was reluctant, cultural pride and reluctance to have the U.S. come to the rescue. But couldn't we have been more forceful?
Well, obviously, this is no time for cultural pride with the president of Nigeria, President Jonathan, in my mind, waiting too long to ask for international help. But it's my understanding, according to Secretary Kerry, our embassy was working with our government. And right now, I am just focused, Andrea, on finding these girls. 276 girls kidnapped at gunpoint. Their school had been closed down because of Boko Haram's actions all across Nigeria, where they have shut down 200 schools, hacked boys to death. Basically, their name means what they're doing. Their name means Western education is sinful. And to think that they took these girls and all those parents could do was go into the forest on motorcycles with bows and arrows. That's what they did for weeks. Finally, this has come to the attention of the world. I'm glad that President Obama has ordered surveillance, U.S. help in terms of hostage negotiators. We don't quite know what they will need, but the fact that we're even talking now about surveillance drones, I think, is very positive because we have the equipment to help, but so do other countries in the world. And as you know, the 20 women senators came together across party lines to call on the UN to declare Boko Haram as a terrorist organization, something our country has already done.
And we have that letter from the senators. What will that do? I know that the U.S., the State Department, has declared Boko Haram for many years now a terror group. What difference will it make if the United Nations now joins the United States in this?
Well, this will show the will of the world. And as you know, this isn't just happening in Nigeria. We're seeing all over the world that girls disappear, that girls are brought into sex trafficking, millions of girls working in brothels. And I believe this should be a major part of our foreign policy, because if we can elevate and lift up these girls and women from these lives of basically being sold for sex, in this case, the guy in charge of Boko Haram saying he'll sell them for $12 off to be married at age 15. If we can lift up their status, we know that a country that lifts up girls and women, that brings them into their democracy, that brings them into their economy, always does better. So I see this as an act of pure terrorism, as an act of barbarity, but also as something that we need to make much more as focus of our own foreign policy in working with other countries. And I just led a trip to Mexico with Cindy McCain, John McCain's wife, on this. She's been an advocate on this. Senator Heitkamp was also with us. And we talked to the Mexican authorities, the Attorney General, head of federal police, and they're really trying to get a handle on their problem and want to work with our country, where we have our own problem with mistreating girls and women, with 83% of the victims of sex trafficking rings actually from the U.S. that are victims in our own country.
And the president was asked about this by Al Roker yesterday at the White House Climate Conference. This is what he had to say.
We're going to do everything we can to provide assistance to them. In the short term, our goal, obviously, is to help the international community and the Nigerian government as a team to do everything we can to recover these young ladies.
Now, we're told that the FBI will eventually be sending hostage negotiators, that AFRICOM is being tasked to send in whatever is needed, whatever is requested. But AFRICOM is still located in Europe. Don't we still have a lot of time, a lot of delay? It's been 3 weeks that these girls have been missing.
And, you know, the longer that time goes on, it's harder to find these girls. I mean, there are reports that, you know, we have not confirmed that some of these girls have been brought into other countries, Chad, Cameroon. We need the countries on the border to also join with us. And if the world can't stand up against taking 276 schoolgirls out of their school when they were simply trying to get an education, do their final exams, I don't know what the UN means anymore, and I don't know what international law means anymore. So I view this as really a moral test, not only of our own government, but of how the world works together to condemn this kind of evil.
Senator, it seems to me that the world mobilized, and international media in particular, some more than others, mobilized when several hundred people were missing on the Malaysian airliner. Now, that's a tragedy, but it was pretty clear after several weeks that that airliner and the people were not going to be recovered alive. These are children who were taken from their school, studying for a physics exam, the best and the brightest in their region of Nigeria, the future leaders of their country. And it took us and the rest of the world this long to get involved. I mean, we were involved, I know, at the embassy level, but there were diplomatic niceties, I'm suggesting, that were observed for far too long.
And I think this is just one example, Andrea, as horrible as it is, of things that we are seeing all across the world. Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times and his wife wrote a book called Half the Sky, and it's based on a Chinese proverb, the women hold up half the sky. There are literally millions of girls that go missing, and it is time that the world reacts to this in a different way, and not just say, well, we don't know what happened. Their parents sold them off. Their parents, they had no money, so they sold them off. Senator McCain was just in Moldova. He said that half of the women weren't there, the young girls weren't there, and he asked officials why that was so, and they said they've been sold off to traffickers, they've been sold off to Russia. These are some of the things that we are seeing, and I think that this is even a bigger discussion than what we're seeing in Nigeria, but clearly we have the immediate need of helping them to find these girls. These are 15 to 18-year-old girls, and they are somewhere in that country or somewhere near the border, and the world just has to bring together its resources, and the UN has to condemn this action through the Security Council and also declare Boko Haram as a terrorist organization.
Amy Klobuchar, thank you so much for your leadership on this. Thanks,
Thank you, Andrea.
And more now on the missing girls in Nigeria. The uncle of one of the victims described his niece's ordeal as she escaped.
While they were being driven away, she managed to clutch the branch of a tree and hang there.
Alexis Akawe has spent time in the region and talked to one of the girls and her family and has written about it for The New Yorker and joins me now via Skype from Senegal. Alexis, thank you very much. Tell me what you learned by talking to this young woman, this student who escaped from the kidnappers.
Yes, well, I was able to learn from her and also from another girl that I interviewed yesterday about how exactly this kidnapping managed to happen. What Boko Haram did is something they've done before, which is dress themselves in military uniforms and attack the town, Chibok, and then go to the school and take the girls. It was at night, so they took them from their beds, took them outside, put them in several trucks, and then took them into the forest. One of the girls who I spoke to yesterday was able to jump off the truck quite early, and she was able to make her way home. The other girl stayed in the truck until it reached one of Boko Haram's hideouts in the forest. And from there, she could begin to see what was beginning to happen between the girls and the militants. The militants were forcing the girls to do things like cook and get water and clean and get firewood. And then she was able to escape a few hours later.
Tell me, when she escaped, how did she describe the escape and what happened next to her?
She described basically being in the camp for about 2 hours and then pulling her friends close and saying, let's just make a run for it. And they began to run in the woods. And she even noticed that one of the militants saw them running, but luckily they didn't come after her. And they reached a herdsman's camp in the woods, and he allowed them to spend the night. And then the next day, they were able to get in touch with their families and make it back home.
Alexis, you know a lot about Boko Haram. You've been in the region. Describe this group, because it's very hard for some Americans to understand these terrorists who are so militant against the idea of Western education.
Right. Well, I mean, the group began over a decade ago by a radical Islamist preacher named Muhammad Yusuf. And he was preaching against the ills of the Nigerian government, like political corruption. And his solution was to start or to rally or to campaign for an Islamic State. And so he gained followers, and they began robbing banks and attacking policemen, and becoming increasingly more militant as the years increased. And then after a security crackdown by the government, where the founder was killed, the group basically declared open jihad, and for over 5 years has been killing thousands of northern Nigerians.
Why do you think it has been taken so long for the Nigerian leader, the president, and the rest of the government to respond? This is a wealthy country. It's an oil-rich country. They welcome foreign investment. They've got the World Economic Forum in their capital of Abuja today. Why does it take so long to get to the frontier and to try to get to this region and find the girls?
Well, I think that the government looked along the other way for a long time. I think it didn't acknowledge the gravity and the scale of this insurgency, and that's why it's only been able to increase in size and in impact. And I think even with this mass school kidnapping, at first, there was no urgency to rescue these girls. In fact, it seems as if the Nigerian government has really been in denial about how serious this war is, the fact that it really is a war, and that it is not winning the war.
And what do you think that the U.S. can do? We're told that we're not sending in helicopters. We're not actually doing a rescue mission, but we're sending in advisors from Stuttgart, so it's going to take some time for them to get there. Surveillance drones, perhaps other kinds of intelligence assistance. Will that help?
Well, I mean, the U.S. has been providing money to the Nigerian government for security assistance for some time, over $20 million as of last year. So it's really going to depend on how the Nigerian government takes this assistance and then uses it and translates it into conducting wise military operations to find these girls. It really, the Nigerian government has a huge military budget, and so, but it's not translating to effective operations on the ground. And it's important for the Nigerian government to figure out why and to do something about it.
And were there reports that you heard from villagers that there had been some warning before this attack?
Yes. So I spoke to quite a few residents of the town Chibok who said that they had heard up to 2 hours before the attack that Boko Haram was coming, and that they had alerted the military, but the military only showed up several hours after the abduction.
Well, that raises other questions about the Nigerian government. We understand that President Goodluck Jonathan has also talked to David Cameron today and has accepted British help. So now the Brits, the French, and the U.S. are all offering help. The question is how it's going to be utilized, as you point out, knowing the region so well. Thank you very much, Alexis. Thanks for being with us today.